address you first, and then I'll come in behind. And we again thank you for coming this afternoon. Bill.
Thank you, Mayor. You know, I guess I want to talk about a few things, and the first being the history. How did we get here, where we are, talk about the funding, and then talk about our obligations to water connections. The need for water in the city of Hot Springs and Garland County in our community, it dates back to 2004. There was a long-range plan, a master plan developed by NRS back in 2004 that indicated we needed to be securing additional water supply. That went on for several years, and we actually thought we had it on Lower Lake Hamilton and was working with a firm called Jacobs at that time. However, that particular plan in 2010, or that plan, was not approved by the Department of Health. So we shifted our focus to Lake Ouachita. As we worked through that, we had the opportunity to secure storage potentially from CAW on Lake DeGray. So now we had two locations we were primarily working towards. That came about in 2012. We had the opportunity to potentially receive 20 million gallons a day from DeGray and 15.75 from Lake Ouachita. The issue with Lake Ouachita is it needed to have a reallocation study. And we joined with the Mid-Arkansas Water Alliance and had one of the first cooperative agreements with the Corps of Engineers to perform that study, funded half by the Corps and then half by the City of Hot Springs and Mid-Arkansas Water Alliance. So as that started in 2012, we worked several years on both Lake DeGray and Lake Ouachita. And it just happened that we were able to secure that storage in Lake DeGray for 20 million gallons a day. In working through the Mid-Arkansas Water Alliance, we were able to secure 23 million gallons a day from Lake Ouachita. Still wasn't sure which would come first, but it was Lake Ouachita, and we were very pleased, and we signed that agreement in May of 2017. It was a big win for our community. So now we knew where we were going, and we started working on that, and in 2018, we passed a $20 million bond for improvements to our Lake Ouachita plant, which is actually on Upper Lake Hamilton. $5 million of that particular bond in 18 went for design and work towards this Lake Ouachita plant. Once we got to the point of knowing what it was going to take to build the intake, the plant, the raw and potable water lines, we moved into securing a larger bond in the amount of $105 million for construction. That was in June of 2020. And we know what happened in 2020. At least in Hot Springs, on March 10th, we had our first case of COVID. These issues of that 105 million was sound at the time. And I want to talk a little bit about what I've heard as overruns and those kind of excuses. But for me, they're just true realities. When we secured that bond in 2020, we spent the next 2 years negotiating with Entergy on how we were going to cross the lake. Originally, they wanted us to bore under the main lake as well as the Big Mazarn Creek. We did not have that planned when we passed the bond. The float and sink method is used throughout the United States and in most countries that have similar situations. So when we talk about the cost overruns, I want to talk a little bit about that and why we need additional funds. When we started this in 2020, we had no idea the impact of COVID. And we are certainly in a different world today, post-pandemic, than we were pre-pandemic in 2020. There was an overrun on the intake site, but that was planned. Originally, that intake site was $13.5 million. We signed the agreement for 19.3, and we made that decision because at the time in 2020, we were going to pump over the mountain from our intake site. And then we discovered, with Christ Engineers, the technology to be able to bore through the mountain. And we made a conscious decision to pay more up front to save generations of cost of pumping over that mountain, saving millions in the future. The water treatment plant, that changed a lot in the 2 years as well. We initially planned to build this plant in in a year and a half, in 18 months, at the cost of $24 million. But as it took us 2 years to get through our negotiations on how we were going to cross the lake, we couldn't bid that plant out until we had that defined. So when we bid this out, it came in at $34.9 million, just south of $35 million. We had two other bids. One was $46 million and the third was $54 million. We took the lower. But it also had some contingencies in there where these, if there were increases, they would be passed on to the city. So we began negotiating with them on how we could shift some of that risk. So in all, the plant is probably going to come in somewhere around $39 million once we have this change order. Finished water lines are the same. They cost a lot different today than they did 2 years ago. And all of these had to happen in sequence, as we knew the plant was the main one that was going to dictate whether we needed additional funds to finish this project. As I mentioned earlier on the raw water line and how we were going to cross Lake Hamilton, we were pleased that Entergy allowed us to float and sink the main lake. However, we still had to bore under Big Mazarn. We had planned to open cut that at a cost of $4 million. Boring under raised that project to $14 million. A lot of things were out of our control. So that's kind of how we got to where we are today and why we need additional funds. We continue to pursue every avenue we can to decrease that. But we've had to initiate another bond on November the 15th with rates as close as we could get them. We had planned on spreading that out over a couple of years, $2 in January and then $2 the following January. However, Act 605 requires us to have that all in 1 year. So we still tried to spread that out as far as we could, with $2 being in January and $2 in November. That rate increase would be enough to fund the close to $45 million that we need to finish this project. So why do we need to finish the project? What is pressing that we have to do this now? And that really goes into our connection history. In 2012, we knew that we had immediate needs now. It wasn't just a 2004 long-range plan that we needed to secure more water. We were breaching our capacity. In 2010, we exceeded 80% of our capacity several times. We did so in 2011, 36 times, 53 times in 2012, and 2012 was a key year because that was the year that we set a new peak for our system, which was 23 million gallons. Our plants are rated between Lakeside and Lake Ouachita, Upper Lake Hamilton, for 25 million gallons a day. However, we can only push about 23 million gallons a day to town. It takes 2 million gallons of water to make 23 million. That is the capacity of our plant. And our new peak was set in 2012 at 23.05. Now, to do that, we can do it a day or two, but these plants cannot sustain that kind of volume. We were very fortunate over the next 10 years to have very mild summers and a lot of rain. But in 22, we saw that change. We started exceeding our 80% capacity again, and we had 17 occasions where we were over 19 million gallons this year. When you look at our connections and our ability to provide water, in 12, we actually had some days where our consumption was more than our production. And when you're responsible for water and providing that to our community, both city and county, it's a very nervous feeling when you're producing all that you can and the tank levels that we have are depleting. So this has become a very serious issue. And it's important to realize that because of those mild summers, because in 22, we saw that trend change again. And to talk about those connections, in 2013, we had 982 obligations, approved connections that had yet to be built, coming out of that 2012 scenario. We implemented a water policy in April of 13, which restricted connections. However, that restriction only denied about 3% of all application requests. We approved 97% from that point on until April of 2021. During that time, we approved 2,620 connections. In April of 21, we knew that we had a plan in sight. We felt like we could move forward, and we opened connections up throughout our entire service area, both city and the county. And since that April 21, we approved, through October, we approved 602 more connections. And I say that to say this. Since 2012, when we exceeded our capacity, we have now approved and have obligated ourselves to 4,200 additional connections without a single drop of additional water. When we think about that, we are at risk. We have overextended ourselves, but we took that risk because we knew that we had a new plant coming. We now have a referendum in front of us. Signatures are being gathered to stop that $2 rate increase, which would be $4 over the next year. We cannot afford to let that happen in our community. We need this water. We need it for our existing customer base and for the obligations that I just mentioned. There is no smokescreen. It has to happen. And when we talk about rates and our quest to keep those as low as we can, I'm very proud of the fact that when you look at the ANRC rates that tracks every rate in the state of Arkansas, and there happens to be 856 of those rates over 650 providers. Our current rate today is the 16th lowest percentile. 84% of those 856 rates are higher than what we pay today in the city of Hot Springs. When we add those $4 at the end of 23, we will still be in the 25th lowest percentile. Our nearest neighbors are twice as much as what we currently charge and what we'll be charging at the end of next year. No one likes rate increases, but we all like water. We need it. Any of these stats that I just mentioned can be validated. Be glad to share them with anyone. But don't take our word for the rates. Look those up. If you don't have the A&RC rates, send me an email. I'll be glad to send them to you. We cannot afford for a small group of individuals to impact the lives of 100,000 other people, our neighbors, the ones that we are obligated to serve. Mayor.
Thank you, Bill, for that fine explanation, detail. You know, water everywhere, not a drop to drink. That's where we've been for years and years and years. Thank goodness for Congressman Westerman and Senator Bozeman. They were instrumental in helping us secure water at Lake Ouachita and Lake DeGray. Bill and I and others from our community were personally in Senator Bozeman's office a couple years back, you know, talking about the need for water. Congressman Westerman's been a true champion for us to secure water. In fact, when Lake Ouachita was down and out and we didn't believe that there was any hope for us to secure water at Lake Ouachita, we started looking to Lake DeGray. You know, and so we were well on our way with Lake DeGray when Congressman Westerman's office called us and said, hey, Lake Ouachita's back in play. We're like, oh my goodness, it's back in play. You know, water everywhere, not a drop to drink. So now we're the envy of the world. We cleared many hurdles. We got access to water at Lake Ouachita. We have rights to water at Lake DeGray. What could possibly stop us? We're going to have water for continued build out of our community. When I say community, I'm talking about the greater community. I'm talking about the county as well. For economic development, we'll have the ability to provide water to those industries that have a need for water. When other places across the country are experiencing water shortages, where can they look? They can look to Hot Springs and Garland County to relocate and have the access to the water they need for their industrial needs. Water everywhere, not a drop to drink. So here we are on November 15th. We're going to pass a rate ordinance, going to pass ordinance to issue bonds. We have two people sign up to speak against the rate ordinance. One is a newly elected JP. Results hadn't even been certified yet for that election. Came to this podium and spoke against the rate ordinance and indicated that if the rate ordinance passed, he would begin immediately to get petitions signed to bring it to a referendum and have the citizens vote on it. Had a newly elected city director. Again, results not certified, come and speak against the rate increase. You know, referendums are very serious. It provides the voters an opportunity to cast their ballot on this issue. And I never want to take the vote away. But at the same time, it's important to understand the ramifications at this late date of a referendum. All the work that has been done regarding this bond issue and the ability to build out the balance of the water treatment plant and the supply lines, distribution lines, will be for naught, and we'll have to start all over. You see, the referendum vote would not occur until sometime in the first 4 months or so of 2023. The bond issues that, the bond issuance of the bonds was predicated upon the audited financial statements of 2021. When we roll over into the new year, 2023, any bond issuance has to be based upon 2022 audited financials. So that's not going to occur until June or July of 2023. So all this effort is gone. And, you know, we don't know where interest rates are going to be this time next year, or September or so of next year. We can only imagine that construction costs will continue to go up, so that is going to add to the total project cost, which is going to add to the cost of water to the end users. You know, water everywhere, not a drop to drink. So where are we at now? You know, we're in a position that we're not going to be able to extend water connections should petitions be delivered to the city of Hot Springs. We'll have immediate discontinuation of any additional permits, applications will not be acted upon. There's been a lot of effort from a lot of people here in this room and those throughout our community, those in Washington, and those at the state level. You know, for us to be in this position and clear all the hurdles that we've been clearing, only to have a small group of people, as Bill indicated, 2 newly elected people who haven't even been schooled up on the issue. So, so we're very, very concerned with this. Our responsibilities here, mine as a mayor, as well as my fellow directors, you know, we may be elected by members of within our community, but again, we have responsibility for the water services throughout the county. Every person who turns on a tap and they're getting water from the city of Hot Springs, I'm their representative. And we're going to have to ensure that we can maintain an appropriate water supply for them. They are our current customers. They are our current stakeholders. And as Bill alluded to, we have obligations for many, many others that haven't tied on yet to the system, and we're going to honor those. But when we opened up and turned the spigots on for new connections, we did so with the complete understanding that there would be, so to speak, not that light coming out of the end of the tunnel, but water coming out of the end of the tunnel. And we don't have that clarity of vision anymore. There is nothing that would preclude those who are acting in this way today to lose the vote in the first quarter or in April, and then have another bite at the apple this time next year. So, so we can't move forward with additional connections if we have a referendum petitions dropped on our doorstep. So, so we're prepared, and it's not a position we want to be in, but it's a position that we feel we have to safeguard those who are our present customers. Our responsibility is to our present customers. And I'll just close again. Water everywhere, not a drop to drink. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. Again, as the mayor stated, when we originally called for this press conference, it was to hold any new applications in abeyance starting today. When I was informed that there were 300 or 400 signatures already gathered, and look, it's not going to be hard to get 1,500 signatures. Do you want your water rates to go up? No, we'll sign here. Those are easy signatures to get, but a lot of times they don't know the ramifications behind it. And I think we've addressed that today, so I won't go back into it. But when I learned that, my initial thought is we cannot acerbate the situation we're already in because we are overextended thinking we had that new plant. So today was to hold any new water connection applications in abeyance, but as the mayor just mentioned, we're not going to do that. We're going to continue as we are today. Should we have signatures, verified signatures submitted, we will end the connections at that point because we know that we're going to be past the time where we can bring back another solution to our problem. So I want to be clear on that. We're going to honor our current obligations that we've already approved. We'll continue to approve those over the next couple of weeks. But on the date that we have signatures delivered, my direction to staff will be we will no longer accept any new applications until such time that we know we have funding for our new plant. It's a terrible decision to have to be in. It's a terrible position to be in to have to make that kind of decision, but there is no other decision. We've been pushed into a corner and we've got to do what we have to do. So with that, I think we'll end the press conference. Hopefully, this will be something we can have resolved over the next couple of weeks, and we can continue as we are and work towards building this plant and putting new water in the pipe so our city, our county, our community can continue to thrive, because we are thriving. We are one of the cities in Arkansas that are absolutely busting at the seams, and we have to keep that momentum. Please don't let something like a referendum on water stop that. Thank you for being here today.